What's going on, everybody? Welcome on into the weekly DFS live stream. This time, we've got Pebble Beach, another one of those West Coast events, iconic venues that we've seen on video games entire life. It's a major championship sort of venue. See it for the US Open every once in a while. And overall, a quality field in what should be a lot of fun this weekend. So going to break down everything you need to know going into this week, whether you're playing Draftkings or over there on Prize Picks. Gonna have some fun with it, right? Going through the board, answering all of your live questions along the way. So welcome on in. I can see a few of you already down there in chat. Look at you overachievers down there. What's going on, Parker? What's going on, Chris? Yeah, been a while, man. Hopefully, you're enjoying football, I'm assuming, like a lot of others out there. But now that football is kind of dwindling down, going to see a lot of you guys back, I'd imagine. So what's going on, Chris? And what's going on, Fantasy Dork? You said you have 3 words for me. Ted Potter Jr. Are you sure that you're not somebody that used to stop on this channel and plug Ted Potter Jr. every single week? I have a feeling you might be somebody else out there, but yeah. I don't know, $6,000. I've seen crazier things happen. And if you're not the same guy from before that would always go out there and tout Ted Potter Jr., then I guess there's multiple of you out there, you fanatics, for a good old Teddy boy. What's going on, Caleb? What's going on, Robert? What's going on? Why I win? And Grove says Matt Fitzdub, Braceface, not going to be it for me this week. I don't know if you guys have seen it. He's actually got some injury concerns going on. Says his back is hurting, which of course, right? Injury concerns, always gonna, that guy's gonna go out there and win. That's usually what ends up happening. But no, not for me this week. I'm not on Matty Fitz. When I saw that news, doesn't make me like him anymore. But that would be so troll, wouldn't it? Right? Braceface going out there winning when I have 0%. It would just be very much so on brand for the guy that I've probably have the least amount of luck betting in human history. But let's hop into this golf course. We'll get back into chat here in a little bit. Love to see you guys down there early and often down there. But in terms of the golf course, a 3-course setup, right? So it's more like the golf courses that we're looking at this week. You got Pebble, you got Spyglass, and you've got Monterey Peninsula. So just like the Amex, going to be a 3-day cut line after 54 holes. But the change here is it's only going to be the top 60 in ties making the weekend, which is often overlooked by a lot of people out there. But there's going to be less people making the weekend because there's less daylight over there on the West Coast, as opposed to slightly inland at Palm Springs. Of course, it gets darker a little bit quicker, but on top of that, you also deal with the fact that you have these amateurs going on Pebble Beach, and it's not like it's the stadium course, which they can make a little bit easier. It's not quite as difficult. Pebble Beach with all of that elevation change, shots where you have the cliffs in play. People are going to be down there on the beach from time to time when it comes for the amateurs. You end up having 6.5, 7-hour rounds. So they end up actually cutting it down to 60 as opposed to your normal 65 in ties. Which means just less people are going to make it through the cut than usual. I'm chuckling because I can see this comment from Nick Mars out of my side eye there on my other monitor. Brian Stewart season. Unfortunately, I'm going to be there with you, Nick. But Pebble Beach is the main course in play this week. It's the one that we're going to focus on the most. Of course, anybody that makes it through the cut line is going to be playing at Pebble Beach on Sunday. And overall, they're kind of similar tracks. Kind of like unlike the Amex where you have a little bit of character from course to course. All 3 tracks here for Pebble Beach are short. 2 out of the 3 are par 72s. Monterey Peninsula is a par 71, so that's the one odd one out of the bunch. But they're all short tracks, right around 7,000 yards, if not even slightly shorter than that. Monterey, even though it's a par 71, is typically the easiest out of the 3 golf courses. So, one might expect that with the, subtraction of one of those par 5s out there for some of the birdie looks. And it might play a little bit more difficult, but that's not necessarily the case. So you're looking at 3 easy short tracks. And for that reason, our modeling doesn't get thrown that much out of whack. At the Amex, it was more just about the scoring stats, players coming in that were playing the best form, that sort of thing. At the Pebble Beach ProAm, there's certainly kind of a skill set for success. And it's all about those wedges. And all 3 tracks, that 100 to 125 yard range is overutilized. You can see at Pebble, it's almost twice as common as what you would see week to week. So that's a huge boost, but also at Monterey, also over there at Spyglass Hill, I'm going to see a lot more wedges in hand than most tour events just because of how short the tracks are, especially for like a par 72, 6,900 yards is even shorter than if it was a par 70, right? A par 70, 6,900 yards, that makes a little bit more sense than a full par 72 at that point. Let me go over to the weather. It's worth noting that There is kind of an edge to play here, so we'll talk about it, but it's more important for Saturday than anything. For Thursday, you can see there's some gusty winds coming in the afternoon, but the only real advantage would be in showdown, I would say, where you could go out there, take the guys that are playing early in the morning. That's usually our edge anyways, right? Trying to get the guys on the most receptive greens, also the most pristine greens there in the AM hours, but even more so when you have those gusty winds coming in towards the end. So I guess for, Thursday round showdown, target some of the guys going off super early. That's nothing out of the ordinary. For Friday, you do have some early AM showers coming through, also some early AM gusts, some of the remnants of that windstorm that's coming through there on Thursday afternoon. But again, just it's not that much to play. Maybe for showdown on Friday, you don't nearly stack the morning wave nearly as much. This is the super forecast. We don't have the super forecast for Saturday. But look at this. You have winds that go up significantly. You have winds that are extremely strong there again. Kind of similar for the entire day, it looks like. You can see like 15 to 26 miles an hour the whole way from 1 p.m. onwards. So as opposed to here on Thursday, where it's only from like 4 or 5 p.m. onwards, an entire wave is going to get slammed by wind there on Saturday. And if they end up being on Pebble Beach, if they're over there, I would even say Monterey Peninsula is a little bit more exposed than Spyglass Hill is, because at Spyglass, you have a solid 8-hole stretch where you're inland, where you either have houses protecting you, trees protecting you from the wind, whatever it ends up being. You're not nearly as exposed as you would be at pretty much every hole at Pebble. And then I'd say like 80% of the holes over there with Monterey Peninsula. So you might want to have guys playing at Spyglass for that day. But, and here's the huge but, okay? That's a lot of the players towards the bottom of the board. Of the players priced $7,500 and above, there's only 2 players on the board playing on Spyglass. And one of them is Andrew Putnam. And let me see if I can find the other off the top of my head. One's Andrew Putnam, and the other, honestly, I can't even think of the other one off the top of my head, because I'll tell you why in here a second, why I don't think it's that important. So there's not many options to even choose from, right? If you're going to try and go after that wave, I guess that's the issue of the guys playing on Spyglass on Saturday. But on top of that, they have to be playing that 8-hole stretch, right? If they're starting on the 8-hole stretch, they play it under calm conditions in the afternoon, and then they go to the exposed part of the golf course on Saturday, they're going to get wiped out by it, right? So that takes that wave advantage and then cuts that down into half. So you're looking at 25 players, right, that might get an advantage on Saturday. And by an advantage, we mean they might be protected by some of the wind for 3-4 hours. And that's even speculative. We don't even know how much that effect's going to play. It might be, a 0.2 shot difference, right? Might not mean much. It might be a whole shot difference for all we know out there. So all I'll say is that there is an edge that you can play. It's taking some of the guys that will be playing Spyglass on Saturday, ideally ones that are starting on the back 9. The back 9 is the side, starting on the front 9. I completely said that wrong. Because the front 9 is the side that's a little bit more exposed. So if you can play that during the morning and then get that, PM wave where all the winds get really nasty there on Saturday, on the side that's protected, maybe you get that advantage, right? And maybe you take 15, 20% of your lineups and you emphasize that wave. Outside of that, good luck trying to find an edge. These guys are teeing off within 2 hours every single day. So if you're trying to find like a mini climate change where, maybe you find guys that are going off at the perfect hours, that's not really possible because they're playing on 3 separate days. There only is a 2-hour window to work with, right? So unless you're on one end of the extreme or the other end of the extreme, right? Either going off really early or really late, it's not going to make that much of a difference to these players. It's just maybe you stack up the guys playing on Spyglass, right? Because maybe the whole day ends up being slightly protected by the wind over there, as opposed to the other 2 golf courses. So it's a tricky wind week. I know last week a few people tried to tinker around with stacking certain golf courses, so on and so forth. By the end of the week, if you looked at the leaderboard, it was a mix and match, particularly up top. I believe of the top 6 players, 3 of them at most were at one golf course. There was like one with 2, one with 1 golf course up there. That's more than likely just coincidence, right? Random chance out there. It wasn't like 4 or 5 guys all came from the same weather stack last week. So something to keep an eye on. I'm at least considering it, right? I've at least considered trying to play that weather edge this week, but just personally, I think you're probably trying to do a little bit too much doing so. The one weather edge, I think that you can act on is the showdown for tomorrow, right? Just go after the guys that are playing early. It's going to be a little bit cool tomorrow morning, but maybe they'll avoid some of those, windy conditions there on Thursday afternoon. And get those pristine greens in the morning. Let's go ahead, catch up on chat, then hop into the player poll on Draftkings. Hopefully that weather advantage made sense to you guys. It's just, I think you're looking into it a little too much there. Robert says, Bill Murray looked dialed in on Caddyshack with the approach play, but hemorrhage strokes of the putter, are you going to be getting there? Boy, oh boy. Bill Murray's a hoot to watch in these pro-ams, though. Robert says, hard for you not to take Kuchar. I tend to agree with you, man. He's got the skill set here. He's got a lot of experience in this format at the golf course too. Yeah, we'll talk about them. There's a few guys in the bottom of the 9K range that are severely overpriced. Don't get me wrong. They're misplaced, but they're coming in at single digit ownership. Kuchar is one of those players. And I tend to agree with you there. It's hard not to play them when you have to invest so little to get that leverage. It's right. You have that FOMO, right? Of like, oh, what if this is the week that Kuchar puts it together, right? Puts together that top 5 finish because it's possible. The shots gained metrics aren't too far off. Parker says, any updates on the book? Yeah, so I still have to send back, get a few updates done on that end because I'm so busy from like Monday through Wednesday. Actually haven't had a chance to go through and do all of my edits yet. But yeah, it's going to be out probably in the next month or so, I'd imagine. It just has to have those final little tweaks made. Definitely a few things that I want rearranged, mostly just like format-wise. Like there's one title that's at the bottom of a page where it starts immediately on the next, where like I want them just to add that one little enter space, right? So that it goes on to the next page just to satisfy some of my like OCD needs out there. But yeah, it's coming along nicely. Appreciate you asking. Fantasy Dork says, where does this Fitzpatrick ownership slide to? So yeah, we'll talk about it right now. Good point. Let me actually go ahead and bring up my player pool right now. If you haven't heard, Fitzpatrick is dealing with an injury, right? So I honestly considered playing him. Great course fit. And coming into the week, he was one of the most bet players. There were a lot of people taking him on their Twitter cards online. The numbers on books were really starting to go down. He opened it like, I think 11-1. It was bet down to 10-1 within like 30 minutes of lines opening. So people wanted to play Fitzpatrick. I was almost going to be there myself, to be quite frank with you. It made perfect sense to me. But dealing with a back injury, he said that he can't swing fully. He hasn't played all that much of late. So all of that, is a huge red flag to me. Because if he had been playing recently and then, talked about that injury, I'd be a little bit more willing to take a shot on him as opposed to just coming off the bench, right? He's not been playing much of late. He's been resting the back. He's been trying to, keep strain off of it. Who knows what happens tomorrow morning? I mean, he might even withdraw before the event starts. So I'm not going to have him. I imagine a lot of people out there probably smartly aren't going to play him too. Now, these injury situations, there are times I tell you guys not to worry about it. There are times I tell you guys to worry about it. I think this is one of the few times where the injury concern is a little bit too much for me to get there. With Xander, right, I took the chance on him. He went out there, smashed there a few weeks ago for the Amex. I mean, I don't think a lot of people expected that, but you're bringing on a lot of risk. I think if you play Fitzpatrick this week, you're taking on maybe slightly more risk because we had Xander out there tell us that he wasn't going to withdraw, that he felt okay. Fitzpatrick, he's not like telling us that he's not feeling okay, but he told us that he can't swing fully, right? That's a little bit more pessimistic than what we heard from Xander. So that's my take on it. You can still play him. Your ownership on him is just going to go way down, right? Like Fantasy Dork was mentioning, where's that ownership going to go? It's going to go to a Jordan Spieth and a Victor Hovland. I imagine more people are going to play a Tom Hoagie now. More people are going to get to Seamus Power. Seamus Power was already looking like he was going to be extremely popular. That's only even more so going to be the case. So as opposed to probably one of the highest owned players on the slate, I'm likely to put out one more ownership update tonight before I end up going to bed. Matt Fitzpatrick is going to go significantly down when it comes to that. I would imagine he comes in closer to like 14, 15% when it comes to his ownership, if not lower when it's all said and done. I still imagine there'll be people playing him, right? People that maybe don't see the injury news, a little bit more casuals about it, or people that just don't care, which a lot of times when this injury stuff comes up, I just don't care about it too. So I'm, understand the play. I personally won't be there myself, but it'll get spread out fantasy. You're going to see Victor Hovland's probably going to be 26% owned. He's a fan favorite. People like playing Victor Hovland. You've seen that before, actually, in some of my review streams where I go through my ownership from the week before. Victor Hovland is routinely under projected when it comes to his ownership number, and we're usually projecting him to be chalk. It's just that when we project him to be chalk, Victor Hovland is sometimes even under projected on those weeks. So, yeah, Victor going to swallow a lot of that ownership. The guys below him, you're probably going to see a 3-4% bump. And Jordan Spieth, he's kind of the X factor. I have him at 18.6% right here. That may actually put him over the 20% mark. So if you're looking for Jordan to be that pivot play up top, which beginning of the week, I think I told you guys, I thought Jordan would be extremely popular. That's not really the case. And it's one of the better surprises that I've seen for quite some time. I think I told my Discord on Monday, I was like, oh, Jordan's going to be 30% owned this week. It makes perfect sense. Perfect golf course for him. Playing some pretty good golf of late. Was your first round leader just the last tournament he was at, right? And no, he's 18%, which unfortunately, when I go ahead and run my next set of ownership here after the stream, is unlikely to hold. Matt Fitzpatrick is likely to lend him a good 5% ownership, which is, again, unfortunate, but it is what it is. Moving down, I guess we'll start talking through some of the plays in general here. Hopefully that answers your question there, Fantasy. Blake says, thoughts on the young kid Smotherman as value? Has been bad, but should fit this course. Yeah, so I played him a ton last year. Like, I used to call him Smotherman and Money. He was, or so-called Smother Me and Money is what I call him. One of my favorite players just because of the ball striking acumen. The unfortunate part here, I would say, is his around the green play leaves a lot to be desired. He's one of the more inconsistent players at trying to get up and down. And his putting on POA, I believe it's decent, but it's a real small sample size. So let me go ahead and bring it up here. Yeah, Smotherman's gaining 0.6 strokes per round, which compared to his baseline is like a whole shot better because he's one of the worst putters on the PGA Tour. So my modeling loves him, especially when you take a look at the Pebble Beach fits of the long-term stats. The short-term stuff hates him. And he's losing strokes over that stretch. The form, like you said, really hasn't been there. And last year when I was playing Smotherman, he was gaining in all three tee to green categories. Like, he'd be gaining off the tee. He was gaining like half a stroke with the approach play, but he'd be losing like a stroke putting. So he's kind of in, groundhog land right now where he's playing well with some of the categories that he's used to sucking at. So Blake, I love Smotherman. Don't get me wrong. Like, I was on him last year before anyone else was. He was kind of like my boy, but he's just dreadful right now. Like, at least when I was playing him last year, like, he was at least, the stats looked good. At least he was at least analytically a good play. Right now, it's just I don't even think he has that, unfortunately. Hunter says your top 3 one and done options. So, putting me on the spot here. My core picks tend to be who I'd go with here. The unfortunate part about a Spieth and Hovland is you'd want to use them elsewhere, particularly Hovland at like Mayakoba. If you haven't, actually, sorry, already happened in the fall. What am I talking about? Hovland at a ball striking fest, right? This isn't really his archetype. So I guess it would be Spieth. This is one of the good courses. Go out there, use a Spieth, use him here, Augusta. You could use him at the Heritage there towards the end of the year. It's another good course for him. McNeely, this is like, I think McNeely's probably my number one and done pick. Ben Griffin would even be in consideration there. Let's go with McNeely, honestly. He would be my number 1 pick. Number 2, Spieth. Number 3, Ben Griffin there. But this is like a perfect course for McNeely. He's chalky. People are going to use him in one and done, but I don't know. This is the type of week when there's a piece of chalk like McNeely that, like, give me one reason to fade McNeely other than his ownership. And if you can give me one, then I'll fade him, right? And if you can't give me any reasons to fade him, then I'm going to continue to play him. And that's a challenge out there to chat. Give me one reason to fade McNeely. If it makes sense, I won't play him this week, but I tried. I looked at it for about 5-6 hours, and I couldn't come up with anything. So good luck. So that's what I would take in one and done, Hunter. And sure, it's golf. The other argument you can't use too is that it's golf and that it's volatile. That's the cop-out argument. I agree with you on that one. But like, legitimate statistical reason not to play McNeely this week. I'm all ears to hear it. David Farber says Hovland or Spieth for the win with Fitzy hurting. Yeah, I like both of those guys. Honestly, I couldn't help you choose. They're both core picks for me. I'm playing both of them. Both of them are going to be 50% owned in my player pool. So with Hovland, I'm going to need 50% just to get leverage to him. Jordan Spieth, he's going to be one of those conviction plays for me this week. So yeah, I like both of them, David. Honestly, I bet both of them outright. It's like choosing between my two favorite children at that point. Nick says, Fitz doesn't strike you as a grinder who will fight if he's hurting. I don't know. I don't want to condemn him like that without knowing him too much. The braces, the Skechers aren't a good look, so I'll give you that there, Nick. But I'll say that. Mark says, what are the chances a crusty old pro like Rose this week plays well, I guess? Certainly seems to be playing a bit better. I think he's got a good chance. He likes the Pro-Am format. He's embraced it in the past. A lot of his highlights with amateurs, like he's going in there, he's hyping them up, that sort of thing. I think he truly enjoys it, particularly if he has a good partner. This week, I don't know who he's playing with. So touche, right? I can't tell you if he has a good partner. But yeah, I think he's got a chance. So does Matt Kuchar in that same range. I'm playing both of them for sure. I think that those old guys look at this a little bit differently than maybe the young up-and-coming players, right? Like the guys that just got their tour card, like they're looking at this like a serious tour event, right? Some of these older players are going to be a little bit more laid back, right? Lean into a little bit more. And you may say that, oh, they're not taking it as seriously. That's a positive to me. When a player can be relaxed on the course, that's a huge positive for me, especially for some of those older players on tour. And their results have really backed it up too. So I like them, Mark. To win, maybe not so much, but the top 5, top 10 who you're with DFS, certainly like them. Fantasy said fade McNeely because his dad sold Sun Microsystem for $8 billion. Hey, maybe he's had some fun of late, but he's played some good golf during that stretch. But yeah, he grew up on the damn golf course. His dad's so rich, it's insane. I think they said that McNeely, if he wasn't a golfer, he'd be like the head of like a Fortune 500 company just because of his dad. That's pretty wild to think about. McNeely could be out there in a freaking capitalistic running companies and all that shit for this point, but he's not. He's a golfer. I think he's doing the right thing, at least in terms of life enjoyment. Working out there in the industry, I'm sure isn't as enjoyable as working on a golf course every day. Lucas says, any opinion on Ben Taylor? He seems to be popping in a lot of models. Yeah, he's that short sample size, enigma, I think is the best word for it. He's got solid stats, but you got to ask yourself, is this just a good stretch for him? Like a good 3 or 4 event a stretch? Or are we looking at a legitimate budding superstar, right? So when you go to the recent form, it's probably most evident here. Let me go ahead and find him. I know he's like bottom end of the 7K range. Yeah, Ben Taylor. Right, the 2 missed cuts, but 4th, 21st, 3rd, another made cut the week before that. Started off the fall swing, just kind of that young, under the radar little cut maker there. So I think that you're a little late to the party, to be frank, Lucas. I played him for both of those top 5 finishes, and I'm not that excited to get there. Like he was just a flyer pick for me at that point. He was like 0.5% owned. So I played him in 3% of my lineups and got my leverage, right? It's not like I was playing him in 10, 15%. I don't think he's the kind of guy you want to play in 10, 15% of your lineups. He's the sort of player, and this is, again, small sample size. So I'm making this assumption off of not much data, is I don't think that he's that kind of guy. I think that he's just like your popper. You'll see him have a good stretch of golf from time to time. Pat Kazire type, where he'll get hot for a 3-4 event stretch, and then kind of be a little bit inconsistent in between. That's just my personal opinion. Most of these rookies that pop during the fall swing, that's kind of what they are. Typically, if they get into contention multiple times, it can be a sign of a lot of success to come. It's just that even when Ben Taylor's gone into contention, he hasn't really done anything with it, hasn't pushed towards that top 3. Like the 4th and 5th place finishes he's had, right? What is it? Yeah, 4th and 3rd, actually, that he was able to post over the last 5 events are like the quietest top 5 finishes of all time. Like he was never actually in the picture at those events, kind of like backdoored those top 5 finishes. So I don't know. I'm a little skeptical about him. I'll just say that. I know somebody down in chat was mentioning that they knew Ben Taylor. So no disrespect. I'm not trying to get that word out there to him. That'll motivate the hell out of him if it do. But I'm not sure about that. What's going on, Lane? I'm usually talking shit in the Underdog Discord. So I apologize if you're seeing me talking shit to their alliance makers, but they bump everything. But welcome in, Lane. Yeah, we'll be talking about some props a little bit later. Nick says the old man lineup with Cooch, Rose, and Webb. Ooh, Webb. Dusty old Webb Simpson. Yeah, that's a rough play this week, but I think I'm there too, Nick. Andrew says, who do you like as outright bets? I have a few, the core picks at the top of the board. I've bet all of those outright. But as we go through the board, get to a few of the guys I've bet outright, I'll mention them as well. Most of them are huge 150 plus numbers. One of them is Aaron Baddeley. I bet Tyson Alexander. I bet Brian Stewart this week. It's we'll get to them towards the long shot range. There's a lot of just ridiculous names I've bet this week. Jack says, chances of Davis Riley, I like him. Talked him up as a value pick. So if you want my full take on him, check out the video, but just been setting up opportunities. He's a much better player than the price tag. So yeah, I think you can get there. Lane says, for somebody wanting to get into golf who hasn't played or watched it, what advice would you give them to learn golf? So I would say just watching videos online. I would say DFS, these kind of videos, probably a little bit too advanced if you're new to the sport. But if you haven't played golf before, just getting familiar with the sport, how it works, how you go out there and play is probably the first step. But if you're just talking about betting, that sort of thing, plenty of tools, plenty of videos out there to get you started. Like I know when I first started, I was like, how to bet on golf. Like I typed that into YouTube. And there's actually a good amount of content out there on that. Speaking of, I should probably go out there, do that sort of thing someday. Has a long shelf life, right? People are always going to be trying to learn how to bet golf. But yeah, definitely YouTube content. There's so much out there. That's how I got started with trying to learn how to bet on golf. I had been a numbers guy. I'd been betting on sports like football and NBA before. Golf, though, I knew how to play at least, so it was a little bit easier for me. I'd been playing competitively for quite some time. But betting golf's a completely different story. You're looking at stats, shots gained, right? I mean, before you get into golf betting, shots gained are you've never heard of them before, right? It's a completely different type of analytic that you're looking at. You definitely want to read up on some of that stuff. Barry says, can't wait for your cheapies. Oh yeah, it's boy, this week we have some dusty old cheapies. I'll say that much. We have some just gnarly picks down low to get into. So yeah, I think you'll like this week. You're saying Higgs and Matthias Schwab, anyone? I'm with you on Higgs. I'm not there on Schwab, but yeah, it's one of those weeks, man. I mean, have at it down low. You're going to have some randoms go out there and pop off. At the top of the board, I mean, we talked about this 10K range. It's worth noting that Tom Hoge is kind of your pivot. Like at 10K, I guess there's a little bit of sticker shock there because no one wants to play Tom Hoge, but he's $300 more than Andrew Putnam. That makes sense, right? Sure, maybe $300 less expensive than Victor Hovland, stings a little bit, but that fall off from Matt Fitzpatrick down to Tom Hoge is typically probably about at least $1,500 drop off, if not closer to $2,000 in most fields. So you can't be comparing, Tom Hoge's price up here to a Victor Hovland, Matt Fitzpatrick, right? That's not really fair to Tom Hoge. He's the guy who's unfortunately, right, has to be the bridge between both the little tiers here. But Tom Hoge is a way better play than all of these guys. I mean, even McNeely is a way better player than McNeely for this week. And he's coming in way lower owned. So I love Tom Hoge this week. I liked him here last year. I played him as one of my core picks. I didn't bet him outright, like guys like Nick Marsh down there, or a few of you out there I know as well that ended up betting him outright last year. That took some stones. Huge payout for you guys. I had Jordan Spieth, so I was a little jaded by that. But like to see you guys win at least, right? If I'm not going to win, I'm glad that people I know won, right? And people won at a bigger number than I did, so that's good to see at least. But just because he's that guy on that drop off doesn't mean he should be way lower owned than everyone else. He's a significantly better play than Seamus Power. Than Andrew Putnam is a comically better play this week. And then you have guys like McNeely here, $9,600. You have Justin Rose, Matt Kuchar, who are getting about a third to sometimes 4 or 5 times less ownership than some of the guys priced $300, $400 above them. So it's just a weird pricing range here. And you have a few strange guys just getting, in my opinion, way too much attention. Seamus Power is one of them. Andrew Putnam's one of the players just getting way too much attention, in my opinion. And then down here at the bottom of the 9K range, people really clicking in Joel Dahmen, and that makes sense. You can see he's my number 1 recent form ranking. So coming into this week, playing the best golf of pretty much anybody in the field. The issue with Joel is he hasn't played golf in like a month and a half. He had his child. So in Joel Dahmen, I have to say, guys, has a reputation for not necessarily being a grinder, right? Staying on top of his game. He tends to enjoy himself a little bit. He had a child, so I'm sure deservingly so, went out there and took time away from the game, right? I think that's more than reasonable to expect. So if you're looking at this Joel Dahmen form and thinking that you're getting this stud coming in, playing some of the best golf of his life, that was the case going out of last year. But he's not going to be putting up nearly these kind of stats, right? He was gaining off the tee. In fact, actually, the shots gained actually weren't that great over that stretch, which I guess is a little bit surprising to see there. But nonetheless, right, number one in terms of recent form, but the recent form isn't so recent. So I'm not buying into it. A player I am buying into is Taylor Pendrith. Taylor Pendrith is just a better player than his price. If he was coming in with form, he'd be in the 9K range for sure in this field. And he's played well at courses that he doesn't fit the quote unquote archetype there. I'm thinking the 3M Open. He played pretty damn decent there. Almost ended up winning that golf tournament. Sunday didn't play very well, so kind of played himself out of contention, but still solid through the first 54 holes. Played well at the Players' Championship. If I had to think of a golf course to completely throw Taylor Pendrith off of his game, it would be TPC Sawgrass. It would be the Players' Championship, right? Top 10s there at that event. Top 15s at a few events in between, like the Sanderson Farms. Does not fit his game whatsoever. So Taylor Pendrith has a track record of just going out there, breaking the mold, and just playing well no matter the golf course. You're telling me that he's going to be 5.8% owned? No one's going to get to him whatsoever just because he, quote unquote, doesn't fit the golf course? To me, that's an absolute gold mine to try and attack. Those are the perfect GPP plays because, sure, Pendrith has missed cut equity, right? He's not a great course fit here. The recent form hasn't even been that good. But from the long-term perspective, we know that he's just such a better player than even guys like Smalley that are priced around him, Thomas Dietrich around him, Ben Griffin, for example. I think that he's just probably a tier ahead of them when it comes to talent level, and you're getting them at like a third the ownership level. So just those are the kind of plays I like in that 8K range, middle of the 9K range, that sort of thing. And why I wanted to highlight a Taylor Pendrith specifically. Let's catch up on chat, see if there's any questions. Again, if you have any questions about a specific player, do not feel afraid at all to go ahead and fire that out there. Caleb says, what's that sound? I keep hearing like a crinkling sound, trying to figure out what it is. Sorry about that. Caleb says, off topic, do you bet on MLB at all when that starts? I do not, unfortunately. I used to play baseball, watch the Pirates when I was up there at Pitt for college. But no, I don't bet on it. It's just too much for me. But hey, if you know baseball, always willing to listen to other people. And if you give me a good argument or good analytics about a play, about a prop, that sort of thing, I'm willing to bet it. Nick says 13K, woohoo. What's 13K? I have no idea. Hopefully, I think you're talking about your bet on good old Tom Hoagie. I think that's what the 13K means. That's what I mean. I was happy that someone went out there and won a bunch of money because I think my bet on Jordan Spieth would have been like a couple grand. Like it wasn't that big a deal. So yeah, I think that's what it was, Nick. Congrats if that's what you were talking about. I think it was. Brad says Sheldon Harden, called him Harden. It's Hardy. He kind of plays like James Harden, though. We'll talk about that. Or Hostler preference in cash. Can I just say I don't like all three of any of them in cash? If you're going to play one, play Hardy. Hardy has solid approach numbers, which tends to really translate into consistent play. Like approach play is the most important stat, I would say. It's also the most consistent from week to week. The issue I have with Hardy is this week has disappointment written all over his name. He's been a lot better with the putter of late than he really is used to playing. The approach play has been there. That's why he's been real consistent when it comes to making cuts. But he's more than viable to go out there and fall apart on approach. Like I've seen it before. I used to play him, especially last year towards the middle of the season, as one of these little pivot plays. And the stats always look good on Nick Hardy. Like if you're an analytics guy, you're looking at models, that sort of thing. Nick Hardy, I think every week you could argue for playing Nick Hardy, but I usually play him when he's 2% owned, when he's like $7,100. And now he's like at the top of the 7K range. He's like 15% owned. So yeah, play him in cash, Brad. Perfectly fine with that because you don't care about ownership when it comes to cash. But GPP, I think he's an atrocious play. I want to get that out there. David says, just bet Mav minus 25 and Hoagie minus 103, both over Seamus. Thoughts on that? I like it because I'm not a huge Seamus fan this week. But yeah, and the numbers make sense too. Yeah, I like it. Obviously, Seamus, he gets a huge bump in terms of his odds because he's playing well, and he also played really well at this event last year. But in terms of your talent level, we know that Mav's a better player. We know that Tom Hoge is the better player. I don't think you could argue otherwise there. And Tom Hoge, probably the most consistent out of the bunch there. Out of those two, David, I really like the Hoge bet. The minus 103, you're not paying that much in terms of the juice, and I think you're getting the better player. So yeah, I like that, David. In fact, I'm going to check my book after we get off the stream here and see if I can try and find that same exact matchup. It's a crapshoot. Probably won't be able to find it, but if it can, that'd be pretty sweet. The Hoagie Whisperer, yep. 3B says, what are your thoughts on Kuchar? Great question. We'll cycle back and go through Cooch. So I've been getting a lot of questions about him, which makes me think that he's really a decision point here. A lot of people are considering playing Cooch, probably see the upside just like I do. And a lot of people have the obvious, issues with him, like the age, the shots gained metrics, the, questions about his upside, so on and so forth. But I think you just got to look at it from the ownership side. He's getting no ownership. And even if all the people that are asking me about him go out there and end up playing Cooch this week, I think at most you're looking at right around 10%. And if that's going to be the case, $9,400, he's a real easy way to differentiate. Even if you start with a Victor Hovland, who I'm going to start a lot of my lineups with this week, and try and take some of that chalk. Maybe you start with a Maverick McNeely, right, who's going to be like 20-25% owned. Taking a Kuchar or even a Justin Rose in that same kind of range there is a good way to differentiate yourself, right? To kind of counterbalance your lineup, taking one piece of chalk, one pivot there in the 9K range. And I don't think you have to force that in. It has a lot of utility. And at a shorter track where it's all about the iron play, smaller greens, that's the kind of course that Matt Kuchar could find success at, or Justin Rose. I'll go ahead and lump him in there too. What's going on, Randy? Good morning from Thailand. Any thoughts on Taylor Moore? I tend to like Taylor Moore here. So Taylor Moore, you got to like the fact that he's good on POA. His POA numbers are ridiculous, getting close to about half a stroke per round. Played well last week at Torrey. Not particularly the best golf course for Taylor Moore, but you'll recall I played him last week because the talent level, he was just better than a lot of the guys around him. And while he has seen a price increase, so he's not nearly the same value when it comes to the salary perspective, he's a good course fit. Arguably, Pebble is a better course for him than Torrey Pines was. So $8,300, even though he has seen a little bit more attention this week, and he is a little bit more expensive, I'll still play him. So I think he was a better play last week, Randy, if we're being completely honest, but I still think he's a decent play here, and I'll at least have him. If that's probably the most important part of that argument there, right? Is whether I'm playing him or not. I'm definitely playing him. Let's go into the AK range. Davis Riley, still love him. He's only 8.3% owned, so not getting a ton of attention. A range here, I would say this Brendan Todd down to Nick Hardy here. These five players are getting a lot more attention than their peers. I know Brendan Todd's right around like 10%, a little bit lower. Scott Stallings is like 10% owned. Nick Hardy is your chalk in this range. He's like 15-16% owned, that sort of area right now. So that's why I don't like Nick Hardy as a play, because he's not that much better than all the other players here. And that includes Dusty Webb Simpson. $7,700. If there's a course where he's going to show any sort of life, it's at this kind of track, right? 7,000 yards, 6,900 yards, pitch and putt out there for these tour pros. And what you got to like about Webb is that the approach numbers, they haven't been elite like you're used to seeing. Like back in the day, he would gain 7-8 strokes approach in an event from time to time, but he's still gaining like 3-4 strokes in an event. So he's not completely lost on approach. Off the tee, he should be a little bit better this week because it is such a shorter track, and the putting has always been volatile. So I know it's a complete dart throw. It's dusty old Webb Simpson, but if there's a week to play these old dudes that are, way past their prime, like not even a little bit past their prime, it is here for Pebble Beach. So I'll be playing Webb, as crazy as it is. Lanto Griffin has also played well at Pebble. He played decently through the first 3 rounds last week, so I think he's worth a few looks. Will Gordon's getting some ownership. Kurt Kitayama's unfortunately getting a little bit of steam this week. The same thing persists with Kurt, though. There's not a course that I won't play him at. I'm going to play Kurt every time he's in the player pool, every time that he's at a golf tournament, because when he finds a way to gain with the putter, and it doesn't matter the golf course either. He's played well at the BMW Championship, super long course, ball strikers course. He's played well at the Honda Classic, right? A course with a lot of water off the tee. which for how inaccurate he is off the tee, right? You would think that would suck for him, but he almost won that golf tournament. It's when the putter comes around, he has an instant ceiling performance. So I'm going to pretty much play Kurt Kitayama every time he's in a player pool. This week, even though he's getting some ownership, I'll be there. Russell Knox, by the way, if there's going to be one random player this week that is way higher owned than anybody expects, it's Russell Knox. He's $7,500. As of right now, I have him at like 11%, 12% ownership. And it wouldn't surprise me if he's 16% owned. Every time somebody tells me their favorite value pick this week, on my value picks video, I ask for that at the end. I think of like the 5 comments I've gotten so far, I think like 4 of them are Russell Knox out of those comments. On Twitter, everyone's value pick there is Russell Knox there in the 7K range, almost every single one. I don't know. I think people think they're getting sneaky with Russell Knox, and he's going to end up being like chalk. So I have him in my player pool right now. I'm not sure if that's going to last though, because, first off, I'm playing Ryan Palmer. I know that. I'm playing Beau Hossler. He loves the West Coast out here. So, and honestly, I might add SH Kim to the player pool instead of a Russell Knox, because at first I was projecting SH Kim for like 15, 16% ownership. But now I'm thinking that that's probably going to go to Russell Knox. That Russell Knox, with all these people thinking that they're getting cute out there, might end up steaming them up there a little bit. So if I'll just say, keep an eye out for that ownership number tomorrow morning. Don't be surprised if Knoxy is a little bit more owned than maybe you hope out there if you're trying to play him as a pivot. Let's see what we've got. Chandler says, good morning from Cancun, Mexico. What's going on? Thoughts on that 7K range? You were finding yourself picking 3 to 4 guys in that range. So, yeah, I'm not as sold on the 7K range. In fact, I think I was quoted. Let me see my exact quote earlier. I sent it to a few of my mods over there on the Discord. Let's see. The 7K range is absolute dog shit, are the exact words that I used for it. So, definitely, Chandler, I think from a build perspective, the balanced approach is a lot easier to click, right? Because the 6K range, if I thought the 7K range was dog shit, the 6K range is even worse out there. But I would kind of challenge you this week to go down into that 6K range, to be a little bit more aggressive about it, because there's not that much difference between these 6 and 7K options. I mean, you got a Kevin Yu here who's kind of been struggling of late. The ball striking is decent. I mean, like a Justin Saw, right? He hasn't really done anything over the fall stretch. And then down here at like $6,600, you have guys like, Ben Martin. You have like Russell, I was calling Russell Martin. What am I saying? Ryan Armour down here. Chad Ramey, who won last year. James Hahn. These guys are essentially the same players. Like I have no real difference in terms of talent level, like in my projections, between a Smotherman here at like $6,700 and legitimately like Benny Ann. They're like the same exact player. Like there's almost no difference when it comes to their talent level projections. So I don't know. I would tell you, Chandler, maybe take an extra stud, like a 9 or 10K option, and really push that. Because if you're taking four guys there in the 7K range, I'm personally not very high on that range, and I don't know if I would want to jam those in. I think the 6K guys are almost just as good. David says Nick Taylor or any of the high 7K guys. I think that range is a little bit overowned. That would include a Nick Taylor, to be honest. Yeah, so how I said like from Brendan Todd down to Nick Hardy, we'll include Nick Taylor there. He was actually getting some ownership. I know he was 11, 12% the last time I checked. He's decent on POA. He's won this event before. He plays well when greens are small, so I get it. But he's another one of those players that I'm usually taking when he's like $6,900. He's usually about $7,000, even in this kind of field. And he's typically a lot lower owned too. He's usually only like 6-7% at the very most. You're getting higher ownership, a higher price this week. And though it's a decent course fit, there are guys around him that I think are pretty much the same play, if not better plays. So I'm not a huge Nick Taylor guy, but I understand the recent form narrative there. Matthew says, Killa Keith or the big guy, Harry Higgs. Ooh, so I'm assuming you're not trying to choose between the two here. But just in general, love Harry Higgs this week. It's kind of like a Harry Higgs kind of course, short irons fest. And Killa Keith, I'm torn on. He's decent track record around here. The recent form's okay, right? It's nothing flashy for Killa Keith. I want to play him, Matthew. I personally don't know if I'm going to be able to get a ton of exposure because I am so aggressive on this middle range. Like I'm playing a Kuchar, I'm playing a Justin Rose. Um, I like Denny McCarthy this week, right? I don't want to give away my whole pool, but there are so many guys around him that I like that I'm kind of being squeezed off of a Keith Mitchell. So I'll say this, I'm extremely conflicted on him. I like the play a lot, Matthew, but I'm not sure if I'm prioritizing him. There's a good chance that I don't even end up playing Killer Keith this week. And it doesn't feel great because I want to play him. I want to make that room for him. But to be aggressive on some of the guys around him, I might have to cut him. So we'll see, Matthew. Maybe get the exposure for me, right? Make sure that somebody at least gets there if he ends up having that big week. Michael says, how about Taylor Pendrith? Like him. So I talked him up a little bit ago. Might want to skip back a little bit to when I'm actually talking about him, but I do like him. He's just a better player than his price tag. He's like 5% owned. So not really rocket science there. Chandler says, was looking at Goya. What are your thoughts on him? Not a fan. So here's what I'll say about these 6K guys. If they go off and they have their like one good golf tournament a year, don't chase them, okay? So Goya qualifies for this argument. I mean, let me just give you a few examples down here. So let's see, and there's not going to be a ton of them, right? These guys like Sam Ryder, the next time he plays, like don't be jumping on him because of his performance last time. Vincent Norman, for example. Let's see, there's going to be a few of them on here. Augusto Nunez, right? He's one of those players. Eric Cole was one of those players. Let's see, Andrew Novak, another one of the guys who's just gone really hot over the last few weeks. Harry Hall, I'd even argue you could add to that argument. Ben Taylor, certainly you could add to this argument of guys that are hot of late that personally you just have like 1-2 good events in a year, right? Like there's a reason why these guys are in the 6K range. They're at 300 to 1, 500 to 1 odds. And unless you think they are truly a breakout candidate, one of those players that is just better than the price tag indicates, then I can't see myself getting to them. And of all those guys that I just talked up, I'm not sold on any of them. Like I don't think any of them are, elite level talents. And sure, like some of that just comes down to the stats. Some of it's just like, I know golf's hard, that you don't see elite level talents very often. I think that we've been a little bit spoiled over the last few years with some of the talent that's come up. And maybe if you're new to golf, you think that all these new guys are just going to be absolute studs. It's usually not the case, right? Last year, by the way, if you're new to golf, you just joined last year. And I know a lot of you out there, because I know a lot of you personally that just started playing DFS golf this last year, maybe a year and a half ago, don't understand that rookie class last time out, not this one, but the one from the year before, was a 2-year graduating class. They had 2 years of the Korn Ferry Tour to decide who ended up getting the tour cards then, which means that those top 25 players were especially deserving, right? There was less variance. They got the right 25 players to graduate from that year. And you could argue that they're obviously going to be the best rookies that we've had for quite some time, right? So if you're new to golf DFS, you may think that all of these guys are just going to continue to smash like a Sahith Theegala, Davis Riley, Cam Young have, for example. But those are like the extreme outliers. I mean, before that, like it was a Sungjae Im, it was a Scotty Scheffler, Will Zalatoris, right, who were those young up-and-coming studs. But that's like multiple years worth of rookie classes. So I want to remind some of you newbies out there that we don't necessarily want to be getting to those kind of like Goyas of the world. Sam Stevens, another one of those guys. Eric Barnes, another perfect example of guys that you're just way late on. Like these sort of players, they're going to have 1, maybe 2 events an entire year where they're going to crack the top like 7, 8 players, get to the optimal lineup. And the fact that they've had one recently is not a good news for them. If anything, it's bad news. They've used up one of those opportunities. That's just a lot of variance when it comes to golf. And if you spend your time chasing those performances, you're going to have a lot harder time actually catching them. That's my advice. Michael says, sorry, you missed talking about Pendrith. All good. Yeah, just skip back and be able to get my full thoughts. And you said, could Danny Willett show up this week? Definitely can. I'm not counting on it. I mean, it's a decent course for Danny Willett. Just, I don't know. We haven't seen him play very much, right? So it's kind of hard to compare him to some of the guys around him that have played a little bit more over on this side. Of course, he's a little bit more of a prominent factor on the DP World Tour these days. So I don't know. If you're watching the DP World Tour, maybe you have a better pulse on him than I do at this point. But yeah, Danny Willett just, I'm okay with the play. I just, again, I don't know that much about how he's playing. Ryan Palmer, though, continuing with the 7K range here, he's 1% owned. Nobody's going to be playing him this week. He likes a short track. He likes a track where it's all about precision. So I've seen crazier things happen than him getting into contention. One of the few low-owned players in this range you could take. Garrett Kago, I think also worth a few looks. High upside player, solid approach player that you can consider taking. Matthew Neesmith is getting some ownership. So I was hoping to be able to play Neesmith here. He's, of course, kind of figuring it out. He's still trying to shake off rust after last year. Last season was his best by far, right? Gone to contention at least a handful of times. Approach play was really carrying him, which was so consistent there in 2022. Rough start to this season. So if we take a look at his recent form here, $7,300, missed cut to start the year, ended the year with a missed cut and a 53rd place finish. So just, not the form you're looking for. And now he's chalky. Now he's going to be like 13 to 15% owned. And I know he's played well here, so I understand it. It's why I was hoping he was going to be low owned this week, right? 16th and 11th place finish at this track. But is he going to be worth playing as chalk now? That's a question you're going to have to ask yourself. If you're fading up some of the other chalky pieces in this range, maybe you can get to a Neesmith and be perfectly fine with it. But don't play Neesmith like 15% of your lineups. And think that you're going to be getting leverage there. You're going to have to be a little bit more aggressive to try and take a stand on him, which is kind of unfortunate because going into the week, I was kind of hoping he'd be like 6-7%, right? Playing him in about 15% of lineups feels about right on a week like this. And unfortunately, that's about what the field's playing him at. So I guess they agree at that point. Moving on a little bit further down, Troy Merritt, still love him. He's 7.1% owned at this point. And take a look at this course history. Must I say anything else? Top 25 galore. What is it? 2 top 10 finishes, a top 5 finish there last year. I know he's not playing the best golf in the world. Troy Merritt, never going to be a sexy pick for you guys out there. But you're not going to find a more consistent track record around here. And the ownership isn't anything outrageous there at 7.1%. Kevin Streelman, might as well call him the king of Pebble Beach, 6.9% owned. He's coming in with dreadful form. So if you're looking for any sort of reason to play him, do not look at the recent form. But if you take a look at the event history, kind of speaks for itself. I mean, outside of the missed cut, 13th, 2nd, 7th, and 6th place back there 5 years ago. Loves playing with Larry Fitzgerald, but is once again going to be his partner this time around. So yeah, call me a sucker playing this narrative. But there's actually a few guys this week that I think legitimately like the format, like the playing partners that they're with, and perhaps it gets them a little bit more amped up for this tournament than most. Streelman is one of those players. So I know that he'd be much lower owned if it weren't for this narrative. He'd probably be like 1% owned in this slate if we were, anywhere else besides Pebble Beach. But 15% Streelman, it's really not that large an investment to me. And I'm going to take that risk, right? That you just go out there, do what you've been doing, Streelman, right? Give us another top 13 finish. That would just be an absolute gold mine at that price tag. There's a lot of lower owned plays in this range. So I think if you're going to try and pivot off of this middle 7K range, it's not the worst idea because like Atlanto's like 10% plus, SH Kim's well over 10%. Will Gordon's nearly 15% owned. Russell Knox, like I said, I think he's going to be a lot higher owned than people expect. All of these guys are like 10% owned plus. They're all getting attention in this range. This bottom end of the 7K range down here, way overlooked. Like a Charlie Hoffman, completely unknown. Austin Eckroat, not getting much ownership down there. Down to the 6K range, it's even better, right? You got guys like Doug Gim that are getting pretty much no attention. Let's see, like Chesson Hadley down here. Just pretty much everyone on the screen that you're looking at is going to be 2-3% owned or less. So if you're looking for just to find a range to pivot into, so not necessarily players to pivot into, but a whole range of players that you could consider, I would say the top of the 6K range gives you quite a few options. A few guys specifically that I would point your attention to, Lucas Glover, there at $6,800, is 1.2% owned. Been solid on approach of late. He tends to play better at shorter tracks. So I would, kind of point your attention there. We also got, let's see, Peter Malnati. You could take attention to him. We still, Kodaira, right? Talked him up early in the week. Still love Kodaira. Loves himself a wedge fest. You got ourselves James Hahn down here. You can consider playing Ben Martin, a solid approach player. Down in this range, I think you should be putting your attention to the best iron players. Don't really overthink it. So when you take a look at this, middle of the 6K range, right? James Hahn gaining a bunch on approach. Not a surprise that he's in my player pool. Ben Martin in my player pool too, right? Gaining significantly on approach. Guys like Kodaira, right? Gaining 0.6 strokes per round. Glover, right? Like I said, still playing well on approach, right? In my player pool. Whereas the guys that are hemorrhaging strokes on approach, zero chance they're in my player pool, right? Like a Silverman, like a Doc Redmond, for example. But Chesson Hadley, right? Gaining over half a stroke per round, gains really well with those irons. Those are the kind of guys that I'm looking to get to. So don't overthink it down low. Typically, iron play, the most consistent stat for week to week. And at a golf course that is prioritizing those wedges as much as they are. So you don't just look at the approach stats. I would add in those wedge ranges. That's really all I'm looking at, right? Like if they're a solid putter, that makes it even better. So David Lingmerth, for example, another one of those wedge players I'm taking in bulk. Down in this range, Brian Stewart. I have a save in this one for you guys. Brian Stewart playing him this week, $6,400, short off the tee, but loves himself these wedge fests. You put him in that 100 to 125 yard range. He's one of the top 5 iron players in all of the PGA Tour, and somebody that I'm definitely going to be playing in my player pool this week. So $6,400, that's the lowest I'm going down here. But you have guys like a Marcel Siem, who, if you aren't familiar with Marcel Siem, let me actually bring up a picture. You guys will probably find this especially entertaining here. Marcel Siem, if you remember, was at the Open Championship. He has a man bun, which is probably what you'd know him for. And he was fist pumping every single birdie look that he had. So I'll stop sharing my screen. I'll show you guys the picture because it's glorious of good old Marcel Siem here. It's this guy. The guy with the man bun out there who was fist pumping everything. Actually ended up winning a golf tournament on the DP World Tour recently out there. Just an absolute stud. The play on the DP World Tour over the last few weeks has been excellent for Marcel Siem. So this number here, the second in terms of recent form ranking, none of it's on the PGA Tour, right? So keep that in mind. But overseas has been one of the hottest players on the planet. And I think you can do crazier things than playing him this week. I'll say that much. Isn't just a meme out there with the man bun, might actually be in contention for being a value pick. What we'll do now is we're going to hop into prize. Actually, we'll go through a few cash plays, and then we're going to hop into prize picks. So we can do that. Hop over to Draftkings. And all right, sweet. Got the lineup builder up. What we'll do now is go through a few cash plays and then hop into the prop side of things. But in terms of cash, I think it's relatively straightforward. You're going to jam in 2 of these studs up top. I think you should be taking a Jordan Spieth. I think the other quote-unquote stud should most certainly be a Maverick McNeely, and then try and build a balanced 7K lineup. So for as much as I, in GPPs kind of hate this 7K range because all of them are getting like 10% ownership, when it comes to cash, you don't have to worry about that. So guys like a SH Kim that are getting ownership but make perfect sense at the course. Guys I'm jamming in a cash lineup. Russell Knox, for example, there's a reason why I think he's going to be higher owned than people expect because he's a solid play. He makes sense. He's played well at this golf course. So in cash, he's a no-brainer in that sort of lineup. Outside of that, right, we can't fill in all of the spots here or else Draftkings is going to get pissed off. But maybe you go and take one more guy from the top of the 7K range. Nick Hardy, right, another great example for that kind of lineup. A chalky player that makes perfect sense for the course. And that would put you at $7,000, right? So you can use your imagination, figure out who to play there at 7K, maybe adjust one of the guys down, maybe take a little bit less of an aggressive approach, right? Maybe rather than taking $7,600 SH Kim, you go with a Neesmith, right? Who's going to be like 13 to 15% owned. To me, the cash lineup this week is super straightforward. It's 2 of the studs, a bunch of 7K guys, and that lineup construction that Chandler was talking about a little bit before, where like you're just living in that 7K range. That's that sort of lineup, and that's the kind of lineup that you should be looking at in cash this week. If you're playing in a GPP, a good way to get off of that build, right? Like I'm still okay starting a lineup with a Spieth and then getting to a McNeely is perhaps being just a little bit more aggressive, right? So rather than taking those two, top end options, and then only taking 7K guys, maybe it's forcing in a Pendrith, right? With that, moves your salary down to right around $6,900. Maybe you go into the 7K range, and instead of taking one of the chalky plays, you take a pivot in a Ryan Palmer. Now you're down into the 6K range. You take like a James Hahn, for example, and then with your last man in, you go with your favorite $6,800 golfer. It's just this kind of lineup. You're getting, at least in my opinion, very similar players. Like I said, I don't think there's a difference between like a James Hahn, a Chesson Hadley, a Satoshi Kodaira of the world, and these guys in the middle of the 7K range. I mean, even like especially like a Higo, especially a Bramlett, guys like Benny Ann, for example, but like even Neesmith, who's chalk here, or even like a Russell Knox, who's chalk here. Your average slate with the solid field, they're like $5,600. Sorry, not 56, like $6,600, $6,700, and now they're a whole $1,000 more expensive. So in GPPs, I think you try to avoid some of that chalk in the 7K range. Take the chalky guys up top, right? They're chalky for a reason, and differentiate with the lower tier players down low. That's it in terms of the cash lineup. Now let's take a look at the prize picks board, where we've already done an entire video on this, right? So, we're not going to completely go through every single prop, but I think the biggest edge right now are with these birdies are better. So it's Tom Hoge, Griffin, Stallings, and Davis Riley. Those are my favorite options on the board, all for the over. The average last year in terms of birdies are better was 4.77. But there's a few other guys you could take too. You could take Jimmy Walker at 3.5. He played well last week. Russell Knox is only at 4 birdies, so a fantastic course fit. Another guy you could consider for that category. I mean, David Lipsky's aggressive. Justin Rose, I got at 4 birdies on Underdog. So obviously, I was actually bumped up to 4.5 over there on Underdog. So you can't get it at 4 anymore. Still somebody I'd take the over on. Teddy McCarthy, another over I would take here if your birdies are better. So just there's a ton of value out there. And honestly, they haven't bumped anything yet, which is surprising to me. Honestly, I don't think they did the math last year and figured out the average birdies, because when there's a 3-course setup, it's a lot more difficult to do some of like your averages and stuff. I had to do it by hand. I actually had to go through, take the birdie counts for every single hole last year, which ESPN, believe it or not, was the one site who actually had all the accurate data for that. I went through, added it up, and it was 4.77 birdies per round last year, which is, significantly higher than what, they were projecting for over here on the site. So lots of overs to be had. So that's what I'd recommend. Strokes a little bit more fair, I'd say. The pricing is relatively fair across the board. Birdie or better matchup. You guys are, it's never my favorite. I think it's a little bit of a volatile category. Greens regulation, we only have 4 players to choose from. Same thing with fairways hit, and they tend to be relatively accurate lines. So I tend to think that Prize Picks is trying to protect themselves by only putting up 4 players there, because they don't really know how it's going to play in terms of greens and fairways hit. So I guess they're trying to wait until round 1 happens to see if there's like any changes to their projections that need to be made and that sort of thing. So that's kind of unfortunate that we have that for round 1. But yeah, no props on that side that I'm forcing in. Something worth noting is that here for the holes played prop, a few guys I would consider taking overs on. So Harry Higgs, Charlie Hoffman, and Adam Schenk, all 3 of these players are decent course fits, have played well over this way over the past few years. And in terms of like my cut percentages, all 3 of them are favored for the over. So there's a few props you could take outside of birdies or better, but we went through a few of them. One even matchup you could take is the under at Rory Sabatini. Nunez, a lot more aggressive player. But if you're looking for the most consistent hit rate for round 1, stick to these 4, right? These top 4 birdie or better props that I was talking about. They're by far my favorites on the board. They're projected below what I expect the field average to be tomorrow. The unfortunate part is that you do get a payout shift. So if you were to do a power play, you'd only get 7x payout. I would recommend doing the flex play, right? So you're getting 5.5x, you get your 1x back if you end up getting 3 out of the 4 correct, which obviously it's only a 1.5x difference, right? So getting that insurance there, even though it's only a 1x payout at 3, probably worth it, right? When you're going with that sort of card. So I'd recommend that, or just going with 2-man powers. So maybe taking the 4 props and mixing them in. I mixed in and got a 3x there. You could do Tom Hoge, somebody like Davis Riley in the lineup. We could Davis Riley, Scott Stallings in that sort of player prop card. Those are the sort of lineups that I'm going with here for round one. Nothing crazy, right? None of those 5-6 leg cards like we see from time to time on PGA because of the payout boost. Just not a board that's conducive to it. Maybe if we had the full board of fairways hit, the full board for greens and regulation, so on and so forth, we'd be able to go out and do so. It's just not quite as many options that I'd be hoping for. Jack says, should we read anything into Cam Young suddenly playing in Saudi Arabia? Surely not another league defector. Might be. Remember, they had all those reports about him going to live last year. I think right around the U.S. Open, there was reports going around that he was linked to that. So it wouldn't surprise me, man. Honestly, I think there's going to be at least a couple more guys that end up going to live. I'm not nearly as negative on live as I think a lot of other people out there are. I don't know. It's just another golf league out there. I put a lot of the politics aside. I'm not a very political person in general. I try to distance myself from it as much as humanly possible, if I'm going to be completely honest. So I try to look at it just from the pure golf perspective. And it's kind of a bummer. Like, look at this. Like, it's actually bringing up on the board here. Like, we click on Euro Golf, right? And like, look at all these guys that are playing over there. Like you said, like Cam Smith, right? DJ, Bryson, Brooks. Like, these are some of my favorite golfers to play in DFS. And they'd be in this kind of field, right? At the Pebble Beach ProAm. They'd be at this kind of field. So that's the one thing I'll say. It's just so annoying not to be able to play these guys together. The fact that we're not getting full field events anymore. But yeah, he probably is going, man. Now, honestly, there's going to be a few more too. I know at least one more high profile player that is quote unquote supposed to be going, right? Like, they put out so much fake BS news anyways out there that, live media specialists, right? They tried saying that Cantlay and Xander were going to go, right? If you guys remember that last year, apparently that's nowhere even close to happening. So you never know really what to believe. But yeah, he probably is going, Jack. Like, to answer your question there, he probably is going. It's a kind of a bummer, kind of not, because I understand it. But they've got to figure it out. The Tour Live need to figure it out. Find a way to get these guys playing in events at the same time again, because I think all of us fans want that to happen. I don't think there's anybody that likes the current situation. Like, even if you're not somebody that condemns live, like I'm not somebody that condemns live. Like I said, like I put the politics aside. It sucks. Right? We want to see these guys playing golf all in the same thing. Definitely agree with that. Freebie says, any other underdog rivals matchups you like? So yeah, let's actually bring up underdog. You're right. I don't want to forget about you underdog guys out there. Let's do that. So a lot of the props I took got bumped. They're a lot worse about bumps on underdog than they actually are on Prize Picks, which is a little bit surprising to me, but there's still a few up there. So you had Andrew Putnam lower than 68. And then you said lower than Hovland. So I'll take a look at the rivals right now. They didn't even have rivals up earlier when I was taking a look at it. So you were saying that you have Putnam under Hovland, and I don't even think they're playing the same course. So actually, no, you're not. So you said you have the Hovland under in terms of a rival. Okay, that's versus Matty Fitz. Love that 3B. In fact, I'm going to play that right now. Thank you for putting me on to that, man. Because, by the way, if you don't know why 3B is playing the Hovland rivals on underdog, he's matched up against Matty Fitz, who's supposed to be injured, right? So that's a good look. Definitely a good pick there, 3B. And then you were saying Putnam lower than 68.5. So I don't like that bet just because they're playing at Monterey Peninsula. So I know you probably knew that, right? But Monterey Peninsula played a shot and a half under par last year, but you didn't have a ton of nuclear rounds there. You had a lot of guys that took it to like 2-3 under. 3 under par here is what you need for Andrew Putnam to go under. It's just, I feel like it's a 50-50 prospect there. I considered it. I actually even considered the over at one point today, 3B, to tell you just how close the projection is there. So I would probably stick away from the Andrew Putnam prop. Let me see what else is still on the board. So the over on Taylor Pendrith at 70 strokes. He's playing Spyglass Hill. I actually really like that. The over on Keith Mitchell at 70 strokes. I actually really like. He's also playing at Spyglass, which should be the most difficult out of the 3 golf courses. They have McNeely at 2 bogeys or worse. Tom Hoagie also at 2 bogeys or worse. All of those are plays that are on the board that I would still lean on the over on. The Hoagie, the McNeely at 2 bogeys or worse, they're playing at Pebble Beach. So it's not the most difficult track, right? Winds aren't going to be all that terrible, but holes 8 through 10 are an absolute brute. The field, everyone's going to bogey one of those holes. I mean, you might have 1-2 players a day that end up going through that stretch without making at least 1 bogey. So a lot of push equity there at 2 bogeys. Yeah, I'd say that. A lot of the other ones got bumped. Like they had guys like Spieth at 2 bogeys. They had guys like Matty Fitz at 2 bogeys earlier in the day. But unfortunately, Spieth's at 2.5 now. Same thing with Matty Fitz. So yeah, those guys that are at 2 bogeys, even though they are playing Pebble Beach, probably not at the worst choices. So yeah, I'd stick to those 3B. But the matchup that you brought up there with Victor Hovland, there with the rivals, I love it the most. That's honestly one of my favorite picks on the board now. And something I may even add to the Patreon now that you mentioned it, 3B. That's an excellent eye out there for sure. But that is all I've got here for Prize Picks and for DFS, guys. Went a little bit over the time that I usually do for these, but hey, wanted to bring you all the content. So appreciate everybody stopping by, enjoying the content, supporting the channel like you guys always do. Goes a long way with helping me build my brand. I appreciate it, surely. And looking forward to this weekend. It should be a solid event, decent field, right? I'm not going to call it an elite tier field. It's not an elite tier field, but an elite tier course is going to be celebrities out there that I'm sure are going to make it slightly more interesting to watch. But now I don't want them showing AMs the whole time. Don't get me wrong, right? There's a fine line between showing an AM every once in a while and then overdoing it. But seeing some Bill Murray shots, right? That'll be some fun to see. Perhaps Josh Allen hitting a few darts from time to time. It'll lighten it up a little bit, right? It'll make it, like I said, maybe a little bit more interesting. So looking forward to it, guys. Hopefully we can cash out for DFS and for Prize Picks. Best of luck out there, whatever you guys are doing. If you're just enjoying the event, rooting on your favorite golfer, best of luck to them out there. I appreciate you, as I said before, and I'll catch you guys for our Showdown and Prize Picks live streams throughout the weekend. We'll be going live for rounds 2 through 4. Going through the Showdown slate for each day, also some of the Prize Picks props that I have my eye on. So make sure you stop on by for those. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any of those when it drops. And if you're not following me on Twitter, I'd highly recommend doing that too so you don't miss all of the news, right? On there, I'm posting when I'm going live, that sort of thing. I'll post links to some of the special occasion stuff that I'm doing, right? Whether it's a Draftkings contest, links to Discord, so on and so forth. All that's on the Twitter page too. So make sure to check out. And Chandler, with the best way to go out there and end the stream, says, let's go Spieth. Damn straight. He's my largest outright bet, probably going to be my highest owned player. Let's hope it's a Spieth week. Couldn't have said it better myself, guys. Best of luck. And like I said, I'll catch you guys next time.